You'd think a decorated army vet would get a little respect. Instead, my HOA treated me like trash, so I showed them what a bulldozer can really do. I didn't move here looking for trouble. After serving 22 years in the army, all I wanted was a quiet place to call home. No noise, no stress, just peace. I found this neighborhood outside the city. Nice houses, quiet streets, and friendly enough neighbors. It seemed perfect. I bought a modest 2-story house with a wide driveway and a little backyard. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. From day one, I heard whispers about the HOA. People warned me. They were particular. I figured that just meant they liked things neat. I could handle that. I've dealt with tighter standards in the military. I read the rules. I followed them. Painted my mailbox the right color. Kept the lawn short. No clutter, no decorations past the holiday deadlines. I wasn't trying to make waves. Still, the letters started coming. First they said my trash bins were visible, even though they were behind my fence. Then, they complained about a garden hose coiled too loosely on the side of my house. It was one thing after another. Always polite, always printed, but never reasonable. I stayed calm. I followed up. I fixed everything they asked. But I could feel it building, like they were targeting me for some reason I couldn't figure out. Maybe it was because I kept to myself. Or maybe they just thought I was easy to push around. They were wrong, because the day they dumped gravel on my driveway without a word, that was the day I stopped being polite, and started using the skills I learned the hard way, behind the controls of something a lot heavier than a clipboard. The first few letters were almost funny. One told me my grass was half an inch too tall. I mowed it the same day. Another warned me about the shade of paint on my mailbox. Apparently the dark bronze was too reflective. I repainted it with the approved dull black, even used their preferred brand. Then came the hose warning. A garden hose, neatly wound and hanging off a hook, too visible from the street. I bought a box to hide it. Each time, I shook my head, smiled, and fixed the issue. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I figured maybe they were just doing their job a little too thoroughly. I've dealt with worse micromanagement before. This was suburban nonsense. I could live with it. But then came the day everything changed. I had just finished my morning coffee when I heard a loud beep beep beep. I stepped outside and saw a dump truck, backing into my driveway. At first, I thought they had the wrong house. I waved at the driver to stop. He didn't. He pulled up right to the middle of my driveway, tilted the bed, and let loose a massive pile of crushed gravel. It poured down like gray rain, thick, heavy and loud. My car was trapped inside the garage. My driveway was completely blocked. There was no note, no warning, no explanation. Just a steaming pile of rock baking in the sun. I ran over and asked the driver what the hell he was doing. He shrugged. Work order came from the HOA, he said. Said this address needed gravel. That's all I know. I didn't yell, didn't curse. I just stood there, staring at the mess. I called the HOA office. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. I left messages. I sent emails. Nothing. Hours passed. Still no reply. Finally my neighbor Carl, an older guy who'd lived there for years, walked over and shook his head. They did the same thing to another guy, 2 streets over, he said. Claimed his concrete driveway didn't meet the new community standards. Something about surface material not matching the neighborhood aesthetic. I blinked. What aesthetic? Everyone has different driveways. He nodded. That's the point. They're trying to phase out all the concrete drives. Only want decorative stone now. Guess you're the next target. It didn't make sense. My driveway was in perfect condition, level, clean, crack-free. I had sealed it myself just 3 months ago. But apparently, that didn't matter. They wanted it changed. And rather than ask me, or even warn me, they just dumped the materials on my property like I was some contractor on their payroll. The worst part, the pile was so massive I couldn't even open my garage. I couldn't get to work, couldn't go anywhere. And no one from the HOA was answering. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I had spent my life serving others, my country, my community, my family. But this was pure disrespect. They didn't treat me like a neighbor. They treated me like a problem to solve. And they were about to learn what a real problem looks like. Especially when it has a bulldozer license. I didn't explode, I didn't scream or storm down to the HOA office. Not that anyone was there to listen. I just stood there, staring at the pile of gravel on my driveway. My car, my garage, my weekend plans, all buried. At first it was disbelief. Like this had to be some mistake, some terrible mix-up that would be fixed with a phone call. But the silence said otherwise. No replies, no apologies. Just gravel and disrespect. And then the anger started creeping in. Not the loud kind. Not the kind you see in movies. The quiet kind. The kind that settles deep in your chest like a stone. Heavy, cold, focused. I've felt it before. There was a time, not that long ago, when I wasn't mowing lawns or painting mailboxes. I was halfway across the world, crawling through dust and heat, trying to keep a convoy moving through a broken road in the middle of nowhere. My job wasn't glamorous. I wasn't the guy kicking in doors or jumping out of planes. I was the one behind the controls of a bulldozer, clearing paths, moving earth, making the impossible possible. They trained me to move mountains, and I did. I learned how to be patient, how to wait, how to observe. But I also learned what to do when you're backed into a corner. You don't fold. You push back. I remembered the vibrations of that engine under me, the feel of the levers, the roar of the steel against rock. There's something about heavy machinery that humbles you, and something about mastering it that empowers you. So as I stood there, staring at the gravel meant to humiliate me, a strange calm settled in. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't some retiree stuck with a shovel. I had a license. A real one. I had operated machines bigger than most houses. I had cleared roads, dug trenches, and pushed vehicles out of craters. And I could do it again, if I wanted to. They thought they could bury me with gravel. Fine. Let's see how they like it when I start moving things too. I made a vow right then. No yelling. No violence. No breaking the law. Just action. Measured. Legal. Powerful. They wanted to mess with me. Fine. I'll give them what they asked for. And a little more. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not out of rage. I wasn't stewing or plotting revenge like in the movies. I was planning carefully, legally, precisely. I wasn't going to stoop to their level. No vandalism. No threats. No shouting matches in front of neighbors with camera phones. That's not me. I wanted to make a point, not just to the HOA but to the whole neighborhood. So, I started with research. The next morning, I called the city office. Asked some polite questions about residential property rights, equipment use, and any local ordinances that might stop me from operating machinery on my own land. The clerk sounded bored, but helpful. As long as it's on your property and you're not blocking the street or creating a noise nuisance outside of hours, you're good, she said. I made her repeat it, took notes, got her name, asked if she could send me the exact language in writing. She did. Next, I dug out a storage box in my garage. Inside were my old army files, wrapped in plastic, still smelling faintly of dust and diesel. Among them, my certification for heavy equipment operation. Bulldozers, loaders, graders. I had the training, and it was still valid. That was important. Just in case someone came asking questions later. I made a few calls to local rental companies. Most of them hesitated when I asked about renting a bulldozer for personal use. But one guy, a contractor I vaguely knew from a job years ago, agreed. You grading some land? He asked. I smiled. Yeah, landscaping project. Got your operator's license. Got something better. Military certification. He chuckled. Good enough for me. I'll have it delivered Saturday morning. And just like that, the wheels or treads were in motion. I spent the next 2 days marking the edges of my property, measuring distances, and studying the HOA guidelines down to the letter. It said driveways must be of uniform, approved appearance, and composed of natural materials such as stone, gravel, or stamped concrete. No mention of how the materials had to get there. No mention of how neatly they had to be spread. So I decided I'd help them out. Since they were so eager to give me gravel, I'd go ahead and use it. Every last bit. But I wouldn't stop there. I'd reshape the whole thing. Regrade the driveway. Level the edges. Add decorative curves. Everything up to code, maybe even better than what they had in mind. And once I was done with that, well, let's just say their office lawn could use a little landscaping too. By the time Saturday rolled around, I had everything in place, paperwork, equipment, and a clear plan. All by the book, all within my rights, all perfectly legal. But make no mistake, I wasn't just fixing a driveway, I was sending a message. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. I was up before dawn. The sky was still dark, but I felt wide awake, focused. The rental company showed up right on time. They backed the bulldozer onto my driveway, heavy and gleaming in the early light. I climbed in, sliding onto the worn leather seat. The controls felt familiar, like an old friend. I pulled the starter switch. The engine roared to life, vibrating beneath me. Neighbors began to stir, drawn by the noise. A few poked their heads out, watching curiously. I didn't waste time. First I pushed the gravel from my driveway, the very gravel they had dumped on me. Slowly, carefully, I nudged it forward, inch by inch, until it was spilling over the curb, rolling down the street. But I wasn't done. I aimed the blade straight for the HOA office lawn across the street. Their pristine grass, trimmed and perfect, was about to get a taste of their own medicine. I dumped the gravel there, layering it thick. The street buzzed. A few neighbors came out, whispering and watching. One brave soul waved. Another pulled out a phone and started filming. I kept going. Back on my property, I smoothed out the driveway. I pushed the gravel into neat rows along the edges. I carved curves where there had been none. I reshaped the slope so rain would drain perfectly into the gutters, not onto the street. It looked better than ever. Neater, cleaner, more in line with what the HOA supposedly wanted. By mid-morning, word had spread. More neighbors came out, some smiling, some shaking their heads. That's when the HOA rep showed up. He stormed across the street, face red, waving his arms. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted. I shut down the bulldozer engine, and climbed down. "I'm making my driveway compliant," I said calmly. He scoffed. "You're trespassing. You're damaging public property. I'm calling the police." I smiled, reached into my pocket, and pulled out my paperwork. The permits from the city, the rental agreement, and a printout of the local ordinances I'd confirmed. Then, just for good measure, I handed him a video on my phone. It showed his crew dumping gravel on my driveway. "No one gave me a warning," I said. "No permits, no notices. Just dumped it here like it was trash." He scowled, trying to find something to argue with. But the neighbors were watching now. Some nodded in agreement. Others whispered about the HOA's history of bullying. The rep stomped away, mumbling threats about lawsuits and fines. But I knew I was covered. By the end of the day, I had finished reshaping the driveway exactly as planned. The gravel looked good, better than before. And the HOA's lawn. It had a fresh layer of rock, courtesy of their own stubbornness. The next morning, I woke up to a thick envelope waiting at my door. It was from the HOA. Inside was a letter, a fine, for unauthorized use of heavy equipment on residential property, and damage to common area landscaping. They threatened penalties, fees, even legal action. But I wasn't worried. I had anticipated this. I wrote back, firm, clear, polite. I attached copies of my permits, the city's regulations, and the video proof of their illegal gravel dump on my driveway. Then I sent a few letters of my own. Not just to them, but to the city council, the local code enforcement office, and the neighborhood association. Soon, lawyers got involved. The HOA board realized they had opened a can of worms. Their gravel dump had violated city codes. No permits, no warnings, and no public notice, all required by law. The city sent inspectors. Reports came back confirming the HOA had broken rules. Neighbors who had been silent before started speaking up. They didn't want a bully running the neighborhood. The pressure mounted. Within weeks, the HOA president was forced to resign. The community voted in a new board, one that promised transparency, fairness, and respect for homeowners' rights. Policies changed. Letters stopped arriving with petty complaints. The HOA learned to work with residents, instead of against them. And me? I kept my driveway exactly how I wanted it. Clean, legal, and free of gravel dumped without warning. Sometimes, it takes standing your ground to change things. Sometimes, you need to remind people who you really are, and what you're capable of. After all the dust settled, peace finally returned to the neighborhood. The streets felt quieter, but different. Friendlier. People stopped behind their fences to say hello. They smiled when they saw me. I wasn't just another quiet vet anymore. I was the guy who stood up to the HOA and won. The one who didn't back down but didn't lose his cool either. Word spread quietly. The story passed along like a whispered legend. Some neighbors even came over to ask questions about their own rights. Others just nodded in respect when they saw me working in my yard. The new HOA board was fair and reasonable. They listened instead of bullying. They followed the rules and made sure everyone else did too. And me? I kept living my quiet life. But I never forgot that day. The day gravel wasn't just gravel anymore. It was a message. You don't need to yell or fight dirty to make things right. Sometimes, all it takes is knowing your tools, and knowing how to use them. That's what I learned in the army. That's what I brought home with me. And that's what I used to take back my driveway, and my peace of mind. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And share it with someone who's ever had to deal with a nightmare HOA. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart.